Welcome to Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we're peeling back the layers of one of the most controversial theories in modern history, the alleged existence of the 13 Illuminati Bloodlines. Are these powerful families silently controlling global events from behind closed doors? From political dynasties to secret rituals, this theory claims a hidden elite has shaped the world for generations. Today, we follow that trail into the shadows.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
The McDonald's Snack Wrap is back. You brought it back. Ranch Snack Wrap. Spicy Snack Wrap. You broke the internet for a snack. Snack Wrap is back. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
To understand how the theory of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines took root, we must go back centuries into a world shaped by monarchies, secret societies, and emerging empires. The seeds of this theory stretch as far back as ancient Babylon and Egypt, where priesthoods and royal families claimed divine authority over their people. These early civilizations created a framework for hereditary power that would echo through millennia, later morphing into something far more intricate and hidden. By the Middle Ages, European aristocracies had established rigid bloodlines that kept wealth and influence sealed within noble families. Power was not earned. It was inherited. Banking houses like the Medicis and Fuggers emerged, influencing monarchs and shaping wars from behind the curtain. Their ability to move gold, fund empires, and manipulate economies set the stage for what conspiracy theorists later interpreted as the origin of a ruling elite that operated above the law, untethered from national loyalties. Then came the Enlightenment and the rise of secret societies. In 1776, a Bavarian professor named Adam Weishaupt founded the Order of the Illuminati. Though short-lived and officially disbanded within a decade, the Illuminati's mission, to overthrow established power structures and replace them with rational governance, left behind a phantom legacy. Conspiracies quickly grew that the group had simply gone underground, infiltrating Freemasonry and other secret societies. The idea that a covert network had embedded itself in the global establishment began to circulate. By the 19th century, industrialization added new dimensions to elite power. Wealth was no longer solely tied to nobility but to capital. Families like the Rothschilds in banking and the Rockefellers in oil amassed unprecedented fortunes. Their influence over governments, wars, and public policy blurred the lines between private interest and public governance. The merging of wealth, influence, and discretion began to resemble what theorists interpreted as a silent takeover of the world's institutions. These patterns of inherited power and secret influence found their way into books, pamphlets, and fringe publications. But it wasn't until the late 20th century that the theory of the 13 bloodlines solidified into its modern form. One of the key figures in shaping this narrative was author Fritz Springmeier, whose 1995 book Bloodlines of the Illuminati catalogued 13 families allegedly connected through blood, marriage, and shared purpose. According to his claims, these families included the Astors, Bundys, DuPonts, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and others, all supposedly orchestrating world events to serve a long-term agenda. Springmeier's work didn't arise in a vacuum. The Cold War had fueled distrust in governments. Scandals like Watergate and the Iran-Contra affair shattered public faith in institutions. And as the internet emerged, it gave voice to those once confined to the margins. Suddenly, complex theories could be shared, cross-referenced, and expanded with global collaboration. The idea of a covert elite, descended from ancient lineages and pulling the strings of power, fit perfectly into a growing culture of suspicion. It's in this historical, political, and cultural soup that the 13 bloodlines theory took root, not as a relic of the past, but as a living narrative. A mythology built on patterns of inherited power, secrecy, and the unshakable belief that behind every public figure stands a shadowy force guiding their hand. At the core of the 13 Illuminati Bloodlines theory are names that echo through the corridors of history and power. These families are said to have shaped economies, engineered wars, and placed their members in influential positions across politics, finance, and culture. While mainstream historians view them as successful dynasties, conspiracy theorists interpret their legacies as threads in a tightly woven web of global control. The Rothschild family often headlines this list. Originating in 18th century Frankfurt under Meyer Amschel Rothschild, the family expanded rapidly by placing his 5 sons in major European cities, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt, creating a cross-border banking empire. Their ability to fund both sides of major conflicts, including the Napoleonic Wars, fueled suspicions of manipulative intent. Critics pointed to their immense control over central banks and government debt, suggesting a hidden agenda far beyond profit. To believers in the Bloodlines theory, the Rothschilds represent the archetype, wealthy, untouchable, and invisible in influence. The Rockefellers hold similar symbolic weight. Beginning with John D. Rockefeller's oil empire in the late 19th century, the family diversified into banking, healthcare, and philanthropy. Institutions like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, often linked to Rockefeller funding, became targets of suspicion. Theorists argue these organizations operate as fronts, pushing globalist policies aligned with Illuminati goals. The Rockefeller Foundation's deep ties to education, medicine, and international development are viewed not as benevolence, but as strategic control over vital systems. The DuPont family, known for its chemical empire, is another key name. Emerging from the gunpowder trade during the American Revolution, the DuPonts grew into one of the largest industrial dynasties in the US. Their involvement in military manufacturing and early ties to government agencies fueled speculation about their role in shaping war and policy from behind closed doors. Other families listed by Springmeier include the Astors, once a dominant force in American real estate and fur trade, the Bundys, with multiple members serving high-ranking positions in US intelligence and education, and the Kennedy family, whose tragic losses and political rise are viewed by some as either resistance to or participation in the alleged agenda. Some researchers even connect occult practices and secret rituals to these families, alleging involvement in mystery schools, bloodline preservation through intermarriage, and coded symbolism in public ceremonies. In addition to the named families, there are those shrouded in greater ambiguity. The Collins family, for example, is rarely mentioned in mainstream histories, yet conspiracy literature claims they are deeply tied to satanic networks and ritualistic traditions. The Lee family, linked to Chinese political elites, and the Van Dynes, allegedly tied to early European occult societies, are cited as part of this transnational elite network. These individuals are often not public figures themselves. Instead, the theory suggests they fund and position others, politicians, celebrities, CEOs, who act as agents or puppets. The bloodlines in this framework are not merely rich families, but dynastic institutions operating on a long timeline, with goals of centralizing control and eliminating dissent. Each name adds to the mosaic, a collection of legacy, secrecy, and influence spanning continents and centuries. Whether through intermarriage, corporate mergers, or strategic philanthropy, these families are said to have passed down more than just wealth. They've preserved a blueprint for global dominance, patiently, methodically, and invisibly. The claims supporting the existence of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines are rooted in a combination of genealogical records, secret society affiliations, and patterns of influence that, to proponents, cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Central to this theory is the idea of continuity, that these families maintain their power not only through wealth and status, but through deliberate interbreeding, occult knowledge, and generational planning. While the evidence is often circumstantial or speculative, it is assembled into a compelling narrative by those who believe in the theory's validity. One of the most frequently cited pieces of evidence is the interconnection of major dynasties through marriage. Genealogists have traced surprising familial links between US presidents and European royalty, suggesting a continuity of lineage that defies democratic ideals. For example, both George W. Bush and Barack Obama have been shown to share distant ancestry with British monarchs. These connections, though explainable through the vastness of genealogical records, are interpreted by theorists as markers of deliberate bloodline preservation. In addition, proponents often point to memberships in secretive or elite organizations. The Skull and Bones Society at Yale University, which has counted members like George H.W. Bush and John Kerry, is frequently mentioned. The Bohemian Grove Retreat in California, where political and business elites meet in private ceremonies, is viewed as further proof of hidden allegiances and ritualistic gatherings. The Bilderberg Group, known for annual meetings among global leaders behind closed doors, is another recurring symbol of supposed coordinated control. Another cornerstone of the theory is the use of symbolism. Advocates argue that esoteric symbols used in corporate logos, government seals, and media imagery are not accidental. The all-seeing eye, the pyramid, and the phoenix, often associated with Freemasonry and occult traditions, are said to signal hidden messages to those in the know. The Great Seal of the United States, particularly the reverse side featuring the unfinished pyramid and the Latin phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages, is interpreted as evidence of an Illuminati agenda coded into national iconography. Springmeyer and others also cite bloodline practices, particularly the belief in preserving so-called divine or serpent DNA. This claim, though deeply speculative, proposes that certain families trace their roots back to ancient Sumerian or even pre-Adamic bloodlines, descendants of Nephilim or otherworldly beings mentioned in apocryphal texts. By marrying within their own circles, these families allegedly maintain genetic traits and spiritual authority passed down from ancient times. Financial patterns are also central to the argument. The persistent influence of certain banking families, particularly in funding wars, shaping international treaties and controlling central banks, is viewed as economic manipulation on a massive scale. The Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank are frequently accused of being instruments of this elite. The assertion is that these institutions were never designed to serve the public, but rather to maintain the dominance of those who created and continue to direct them. While none of these pieces individually constitute irrefutable proof, together they form a lattice of suspicion that supports the belief in a deliberate, hidden architecture of power. To believers, the consistency of names, symbols, and institutions across generations is not a random convergence. It is the evidence of a well-executed plan unfolding quietly beneath the surface of world history. Dissecting the core claims behind the 13 Illuminati bloodlines reveals a complex mixture of historical fact, interpretation, and speculative reasoning. Proponents of the theory rely heavily on patterns, familial ties, symbolic connections, financial entanglements, but skeptics argue that pattern recognition is not evidence in itself. Verifying the claims requires separating what can be historically validated from what relies on inference, association, or suggestion. The genealogical links between political leaders and royal bloodlines, for example, are often technically accurate. Many US presidents, including Franklin D. Roosevelt, both Bush presidents, and Barack Obama, have been found to share distant ancestry with European nobility. But such links are statistically inevitable. With centuries of intermarriage among European settlers and colonial elites, most individuals of Western European descent can trace lineage to historical monarchs. Genealogy experts caution that these connections don't prove coordinated bloodline control, but rather reflect the mathematical reality of ancestral overlap in large populations. Membership in exclusive organizations is another pillar of the theory. Groups like Skull and Bones, the Bilderberg Group, and the Bohemian Club are real, and their guest lists have included high-level figures across government and industry. Their private meetings and secrecy do little to alleviate suspicion. But no direct evidence has surfaced showing that these groups operate with a unified agenda, much less one tied to ancient bloodlines. Critics argue that elitism and secrecy alone do not equal conspiracy, though they often create the illusion of one. Symbolism, while undeniably present, is among the most debated aspects. The pyramid and the all-seeing eye on the US dollar, the use of sun worship motifs in architecture, and the prevalence of esoteric imagery in entertainment all serve as examples. These symbols do have historical ties to Freemasonry, alchemy, and ancient religions. But whether their modern use is intentional signaling or aesthetic borrowing is difficult to determine. Designers, artists, and architects may be influenced by tradition or symmetry without any conspiratorial intent. Yet believers point to the repetition across corporate logos, award shows, and government seals as too consistent to be coincidence. The claims of bloodline purity and Nephilim ancestry fall further into unverifiable territory. While there are ancient texts and mythologies that speak of hybrid beings, giants, or fallen angels, modern science has found no DNA evidence of such lineage in human populations. Assertions that elite families interbreed to preserve alien or serpent bloodlines rely on metaphysical belief systems, not genetic research. Still, in some occult traditions, such symbolism carries real significance, and theorists argue that these esoteric beliefs influence elite behavior regardless of their scientific basis. Financial influence, however, is harder to dismiss. Families like the Rothschilds and Rockefellers have undeniably played massive roles in global finance. Their networks span generations, and they have funded institutions that shaped modern geopolitics. What remains murky is intent. Is this influence evidence of a coordinated plan to control humanity, or simply the predictable result of inherited wealth and capitalist expansion? Publicly available financial records show vast holdings, but no paper trail tying these resources to a global Illuminati directive. What becomes clear in evaluating the evidence is that much of it walks a line between truth and speculation. Some claims are historically accurate, but not necessarily conspiratorial. Others are circumstantial, interpreted to fit a larger framework. Still others rely entirely on symbolic or metaphysical reasoning. The result is a theory held together not by a smoking gun, but by a mosaic of fragments, some verified, some assumed, and others imagined, woven into a story that for many feels too coherent to ignore.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
At Starbucks, we've more than doubled parental leave for full and part-time baristas, giving them up to 18 weeks of paid time off, so they can be there for early bedtimes, late nights, first laughs, and spend more time with the best company they know. At Starbucks, benefits like parental leave are just the start. Learn more about Starbucks industry-leading benefits at starbucks.com/partners.
Critics of the 13 Illuminati Bloodlines theory argue that its allure stems less from concrete proof and more from psychological pattern-seeking and mistrust of complex systems. Scholars, historians, and skeptics often view the theory as a product of confirmation bias, where evidence is interpreted through a predetermined lens and contradictory data is ignored or dismissed. Rather than unveiling a hidden truth, they suggest, the theory functions as a grand narrative to make sense of an unpredictable and unequal world. One of the primary challenges to the theory is its reliance on association rather than causation. Just because influential individuals are connected through family or elite institutions doesn't prove a coordinated plan. Modern political dynasties like the Bushes, Clintons, or Kennedys can be explained through access, wealth, and name recognition rather than secret rituals or bloodline agendas. Critics argue that the persistence of power within certain families is a socio-political reality, not evidence of Illuminati control. Genealogical connections are also deeply scrutinized. While it's true that public figures often share common ancestors, geneticists emphasize that with a sufficient number of generations, millions of people can claim distant kinship with royalty. The idea that these links confirm an orchestrated bloodline conspiracy ignores the mathematical inevitability of shared ancestry in human populations. Theorists, however, often present these findings as if they represent deliberate continuity rather than coincidental overlap. Symbolism, too, is contested. While ancient symbols like the pyramid, the eye, or serpents appear in many places, scholars of semiotics argue that symbols are fluid and open to interpretation. A symbol's meaning can vary dramatically depending on context, culture, and intent. For example, the all-seeing eye can represent divine providence in one context and surveillance or control in another. Critics accuse conspiracy theorists of cherry-picking symbols to construct patterns that may not exist, often ignoring cultural or historical explanations. Furthermore, critics argue that the supposed secrecy of elite groups doesn't equate to nefarious plotting. Exclusive gatherings like the Bilderberg Group or Bohemian Grove do raise questions about transparency, but journalists, researchers, and former attendees have described them as policy forums, networking opportunities, or even theatrical retreats, hardly evidence of a hidden world government. The secrecy, they claim, fuels speculation precisely because it limits access and invites projection. Academic critics also point to the dangers of scapegoating. Conspiracy theories that focus on hidden cabals or wealthy families have historically been used to justify anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and political repression. The Rothschilds, in particular, have been the target of anti-Semitic conspiracies for over 2 centuries. Critics warn that the 13 Bloodlines theory, by reviving these themes under a new banner, risks perpetuating old prejudices in modern forms. Moreover, skeptics emphasize the lack of falsifiability in the theory. Because the alleged Illuminati operates in secret, any lack of evidence is often interpreted not as disproof, but as further proof of how deeply hidden the conspiracy is. This circular logic makes the theory immune to refutation and places it outside the realm of empirical inquiry. In this view, the 13 Bloodlines narrative is compelling, not because it's verified, but because it offers a sense of clarity and control in a chaotic world. By attributing global complexity to a secretive elite, it provides a simple explanation for inequality, war, and suffering. But to critics, it is that very simplicity, its refusal to accommodate randomness, nuance, or structural analysis that undermines its credibility. The result is a worldview that may comfort or thrill, but ultimately rests more on belief than on proof. Beyond the debate over evidence and skepticism, the theory of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines has profound implications for how people interpret authority, power, and history itself. It reflects a deeper unease with the structures that govern modern life, systems that seem increasingly unaccountable, opaque, and beyond the influence of ordinary citizens. Whether one believes in the literal existence of these bloodlines or not, the theory taps into a cultural undercurrent, a growing suspicion that democracy is a facade and that unseen forces control outcomes from behind the scenes. This perspective reshapes how people engage with politics and institutions. If global events are seen not as the result of conflicting interests or messy compromises, but as parts of a pre-planned script written by intergenerational elites, then civic engagement begins to feel meaningless. The idea that votes don't matter because elections are orchestrated, or that social movements are merely tools of elite manipulation, leads to a form of political nihilism. It undermines trust not just in governments, but in the very concept of agency. The theory also reflects a historical memory of aristocracy and divine right, a time when birth alone determined one's place in the world. In an age that claims to be meritocratic, where success is supposedly earned, the persistence of elite families with disproportionate influence feels like a betrayal of those ideals. The Bloodlines theory gives voice to that frustration, suggesting that despite appearances, little has changed. The kings may be gone, but the crowns were simply passed down in silence. Psychologically, the theory offers a kind of narrative symmetry. In a world filled with randomness, chaos, and suffering, believing in a master plan, even a sinister one, can be strangely comforting. It restores a sense of order, even if that order is malevolent. For those disillusioned by wars, economic collapses, or political corruption, the idea of hidden puppet masters can explain the otherwise inexplicable. Tragedies become engineered. Financial crises become planned resets. History becomes a chessboard where every move was anticipated generations ago. Culturally, the theory has found fertile ground in societies where inequality is stark and upward mobility feels increasingly out of reach. When billionaires buy influence, when corporate interests override public good, and when the same surnames appear generation after generation in politics and business, it becomes easier to imagine a hidden hand. The theory doesn't need hard proof. It draws strength from visible imbalances and the emotional truth that power is rarely held accountable. It also serves as a form of mythology. Much like ancient epics that explain the forces of nature through gods and monsters, the 13 bloodlines provide a narrative to explain the invisible forces of modern life. They become the villains in a global story, where the ordinary citizen is forever under watch, forever manipulated. The theory reduces complexity to characters, powerful families with secret rituals and ancient plans. It makes the vast, abstract machinery of global economics and geopolitics feel personal, knowable, and adversarial. Whether taken literally or symbolically, the theory's implications are profound. It reshapes how people view their place in the world, their relationship to power, and the nature of truth itself. In doing so, it creates a psychological architecture where skepticism becomes default, authority becomes suspect, and history becomes suspect to reinterpretation, not through analysis, but through suspicion. In this framework, belief itself becomes a form of resistance, a stand against what is perceived as a silent, all-encompassing control. The influence of the 13 Illuminati Bloodlines theory extends far beyond fringe forums or late-night radio. It has steadily infiltrated mainstream discourse, shaping the way people interpret news, politics, and celebrity culture. Over the last 2 decades, this theory has become part of the cultural fabric, often referenced, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, in films, music, television, and online communities. Its spread has been accelerated by social media platforms, where complex narratives can be distilled into viral images, cryptic posts, or 30-second videos claiming to reveal the truth they don't want you to know. Celebrities, in particular, have become recurring characters in the theory's narrative. Prominent artists and performers, especially in the music industry, are frequently accused of being pawns or initiates of the elite. References to pyramids, single-eye gestures, and occult themes in music videos or award shows are interpreted as signs of allegiance to the Illuminati. Artists like Beyoncé, Jay-Z, Rihanna, and Kanye West have all been targeted by such claims, not because of concrete evidence, but because their visibility, success, and symbolism fit the narrative structure. In this context, fame itself becomes suspicious, a potential indicator of complicity. Media coverage is similarly scrutinized. News anchors, television hosts, and political commentators are often viewed as mouthpieces for the elite, actors delivering a curated version of reality. Major networks are believed to be owned or influenced by bloodline families or their proxies, shaping public opinion while hiding inconvenient truths. Even the repetition of certain phrases, the framing of stories, or the timing of global events is interpreted through this lens. For believers, nothing is accidental. Everything is part of the plan. Online communities have amplified this mindset. On platforms like YouTube, Reddit, and TikTok, users dissect interviews, analyze footage, and share proof in the form of slowed-down video clips, symbolic breakdowns, or genealogy charts. Algorithms designed to feed content based on user interest often funnel curious viewers deeper into a self-reinforcing echo chamber. This digital environment allows the theory to evolve, mutate, and adapt in real time, drawing in new audiences and reinforcing old suspicions. The entertainment industry has also played a paradoxical role. Films and shows that reference secret societies, bloodlines, or global conspiracies often blur the line between fiction and speculation. Franchises like The Da Vinci Code, Eyes Wide Shut, and National Treasure have woven elements of these theories into their plots, sometimes using historical references that mirror claims made by theorists. While intended as fiction, these portrayals often reinforce belief by suggesting that Hollywood itself is leaking hidden truths under the guise of storytelling. At the same time, parody and satire complicate the landscape. Some references to Illuminati symbolism are made in jest or as commentary on the theory's popularity, yet they are often interpreted by true believers as revelation through concealment, the idea that truth is disclosed to the public in ways that are deliberately indirect, allowing elites to claim plausible deniability. In this framework, even ridicule is viewed as a tactic of control. The result is a narrative so embedded in modern culture that it no longer relies solely on books or lectures. It lives in hashtags, memes, and music videos. It colors the way people interpret everything, from global summits to Super Bowl halftime shows, and because it adapts so easily to new content and personalities, it remains perennially relevant. Each new public figure, crisis, or trend becomes a potential puzzle piece in a story that, true or not, continues to shape how millions view the world around them. In the more speculative reaches of the 13 Illuminati Bloodlines theory, the narrative stretches beyond politics, finance, and culture into the realms of the arcane, the extraterrestrial, and the metaphysical. These fringe interpretations add additional layers of intrigue, and for some terror, to the idea of a ruling elite. Here, the bloodlines are not just powerful families manipulating human affairs. They are presented as something entirely otherworldly, guardians of ancient knowledge, hybrids of non-human origin, or even avatars of interdimensional entities. One of the most provocative extensions of the theory is the assertion that the bloodlines are descended from non-human ancestors. Proponents like David Icke claim that certain elite families are not merely part of a political or financial network, but are actually part of a reptilian lineage. According to this view, these beings originated from the Alpha Draconis star system and came to Earth in ancient times, interbreeding with humans to create hybrid bloodlines. These hybrids, Icke contends, are capable of shifting between human and reptilian form, and their control over world affairs is part of a long-term plan to dominate humanity. While this concept is often dismissed as science fiction or delusion, it has gained a surprising following. Icke's lectures, books, and interviews have reached millions worldwide, and many within alternative communities see his claims not as literal truths, but as metaphorical representations of inhumanity, coldness, and control. Even among those who reject the idea of shape-shifting lizards, the metaphor resonates. A class of rulers so removed from the human experience that they might as well be from another world. Another fringe interpretation centers around ancient blood rites and occult practices. Some believe that the families maintain power through ritualistic sacrifice, spiritual pacts, and dark ceremonial traditions passed down through generations. Theories often point to supposed Masonic temples, secret chambers, or remote castles where these acts are said to take place. Alleged eyewitness accounts, leaked documents, and cryptic symbolism are all cited as partial proof of these secret rituals. To believers, the power of the bloodlines isn't just political, it's alchemical, involving hidden spiritual dominion. The concept of the Black Sun also emerges in some versions of the theory, a metaphysical source of power worshipped in esoteric Nazi occultism, later adopted by fringe theorists as a symbol of the hidden force guiding the elite. This dark energy, they claim, is harnessed through bloodline rituals and ancient knowledge. It's not just control over resources or governments, it's control over spiritual evolution, over the very soul of humanity. Another angle links the bloodlines to ancient civilizations like Atlantis or Lemuria, where advanced knowledge and technology were allegedly possessed by an elite priesthood. The fall of these civilizations, according to this theory, didn't mark the end of their influence. Survivors fled underground or interbred with surface populations, preserving their wisdom and control through carefully maintained lineages. In this view, modern Illuminati families are the final inheritors of a pre-cataclysmic world order, keepers of secrets older than recorded history. These speculative elements, while far removed from verifiable fact, serve a purpose within the broader theory. They deepen the mythology, offering explanations for the apparent inescapability of elite dominance. They transform what might otherwise be a political or economic critique into a cosmic struggle between light and darkness, humanity and its hidden rulers. Whether interpreted as metaphor, fiction, or literal truth, these fringe ideas ensure that the theory evolves, not just as conspiracy, but as legend. The theory of the 13 Illuminati bloodlines endures not merely because of the names it invokes or the claims it makes, but because of the story it tells. A story of secrecy, control, and inheritance stretching across centuries and civilizations. It's a narrative that offers coherence in a chaotic world, casting global events as the products of hidden hands rather than random chance. Whether viewed through the lens of suspicion, symbolism, or ancient power structures, the theory presents a grand architecture of influence that feels at once familiar and unknowable. For some, it's a chilling portrait of the world as it truly is, a world ruled not by elected leaders or shifting political ideologies, but by a concealed aristocracy whose goals remain obscured. For others, it's a modern myth, reflecting our collective fears about inequality, deception, and the loss of personal agency. Still others see it as dangerous misinformation, a worldview that blurs truth and fiction, often at the expense of reason and responsibility. Yet the persistence of the theory speaks to a deeper cultural wound. In times of economic collapse, social fragmentation, and technological upheaval, people search for explanations. They want to know why the system feels rigged, why injustice persists, why certain names and faces seem to reappear at every turn of history's wheel. The 13 Bloodlines theory offers answers, simplified, dramatic, and deeply symbolic, even if those answers exist in a realm beyond verification. It also forces difficult questions. Who really holds power in our world? How is influence maintained and transmitted? Are the structures of modern life as open and democratic as they appear? Even if one rejects the Bloodlines theory in its literal form, the questions it raises about transparency, elitism, and historical continuity remain uncomfortably relevant. Ultimately, the theory is less about the families themselves and more about what they represent. Inherited dominance, ritualized control. The idea that behind every visible authority lies an invisible one, more ancient, more permanent, more absolute. It's a framework that challenges not just institutions but our very perception of freedom and truth. In a world increasingly defined by opaque algorithms, hidden algorithms, and digital manipulation, the hunger for clarity has never been stronger. Whether the 13 Illuminati bloodlines are historical reality or metaphorical construct, their story resonates because it reflects the unease that someone, might be pulling the strings from a place just out of reach. Thanks for listening. This has been Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.